Right, this is going to be episode 47 of OverSight. Even though this show features nobody from the Houston Outlaws organization, and indeed, a lot of this show will be centered around the stage playoffs, which we've now reached, which, spoiler, the Houston Outlaws didn't reach. So really, there is no contextual reason for me to be able to even reference the Houston Outlaws now. But I thought we'd get it out of the way at the beginning, Monty. So should we just get this part out of the way before we go on to the rest of the show? Before we even introduce the guests, let's just get this section of the show out of the way, which is, like, so... This week on Monty Was Right After All is they never won any games, Monty. They won a couple of maps here and there. Even then, it wasn't very often. And so, obviously, there is no control group. We don't know what would have happened if they had have run the fabled DPS comps that they should have just played, according to many people. No one can ever know. For all I know, Monty, maybe they would have won even less games. Maybe they would have won no maps whatsoever. They could be entirely correct. But say your piece. What do you want to say about this particular topic at this moment, when indeed they didn't win any matches?
So it was never about just running DPS comps, right? The argument was, should you put your effort into really refining goats if you're going to play goats every point versus, because we all know, and I think Gunba and Babybay here can agree with me, that you will have to play goats at some point. It is inevitable. But the point is we see teams like the Shanghai Dragons really emphasizing Sombra Afara or having a little bit of variance in some of these maps. Maps like Rialto, I don't think you're ever going to get away with not playing goats on, but there are many other maps that I think at least you can partially not play goats on. And if we look at the Houston Outlaws, they won 4 maps. Only 2 of those maps were they playing dominant goats compositions, and both of those maps were versus the Charge, the Guangzhou Charge. They won 1 map playing DPS comps on Busan versus the Titans, and they won a second map playing a Orisa Junkrat Widow combination with Linkser and Jake on Anubis, which has always been a map that continues to favor that defense. So we did see some variance. So I would argue they beat better opponents on those maps, looking a little bit differently. I think when they went into Goats Mirrors, that is when they looked their worst this stage. And now here we are, 4 map wins. They were full held 10 times. So that is the second worst full hold. So when I say full hold, I mean they took 0 points on non-control maps. So 0 points on Escort, Hybrid, and Assault. The Shanghai Dragons in stage 2 of last year were full held 13 times, but they had 3 more matches to play.
Ouch.
Which means that on a per map match basis, the Houston Outlaws have the highest rate of being full held.
I like the way he came with like the Shanghai Dragons season 1 stat just for like mad reference there. I know, like, I wasn't prepared or anything for this. Like, there we go.
I'm done.
Did you say that? I missed all of that.
Well, no, I just have my notes ready for this. And, I don't think at the end of the day that it's really fair to blame the Houston Outlaws, like players and staff, because I think that they really, I talked about this on Watchpoint, where I think like it's the parent organization that really needs to like fix the problems and hire them more coaches and staff, because I do think that they're understaffed. And it's while I do not believe that their current roster is going to be able to get them far, I think it is unfair to not give that roster a real shot. So if I were them, I would buff up my coaching and support staff and ride it out for the rest of the year and see what happens, and then make changes if necessary. Because you don't want to change too many things at the same time. It's not a good experiment, right?
Okay. Right, Babybay. DPS when you can of the Atlanta Reign. You've been known to play a few DPS champions in your time. Yeah. What do you think? Should Outlaws have done it a bit more? Does it actually apply in their case? What do you think on this topic?
I mean, I think they just needed to pick 6 or 7 players and just play them only. They switched rosters almost every other match. Like, you're not going to get any consistency. And there are points where if you're playing against a team that's really known for being a good GOATS team, and it's like specifically like first points and like etc. Like, Blizzworld against New York, we knew they were gonna run GOATS. We went 3 DPS because it's actually a hard counter, on some of these points. And if the other team doesn't make the appropriate swaps, you can stick on that. So I think that there are points where you can run this DPS comp, and they definitely have like phenomenal DPS players. So I think they could have mixed it up.
Okay. So I have a question for you from a coaching perspective, Gunba, since you're here. What do you make of the fact that Babybay's talking about their roster, and I criticize them for not being able to field a Tracer player last year despite playing 4 players on that role? I can sort of understand that. It's a mechanical role. Like, not everybody's going to be able to play Tracer. But we've seen them play a bunch of Brigitte players this season. And to me, when you can't even teach a pro player, like one of your 8 pro players, how to play Brigitte, that is a problem. Like, I think that's an actual, like, we don't have the infrastructure to coach people properly issue. What would you say about teaching players Brigitte?
So I'll go through that and I'll join in on shitting on Houston Outlaws. I think there's a philosophy difference between a lot of teams where they want to try out subs. They feel obligated to give their players time. It's kind of hard to do that sometimes, and these opportunities are just things that teams take to try and force it in, right? So for them, it's playing a bunch of different players. For other teams, it's role swapping and, like, having DPS players and some other players for tanks. Yeah, I mean, I think they failed. I think they should probably stop playing their players as often as they do and just try and commit, which is what almost every other team does every stage. Brigitte is a hard hero for some players. I think it's a purely brain hero, and some players who are professional players got there through mechanics. So I understand that aspect of it. Yeah, it's disgraceful. Of course it is, right? And, like, I think had they committed to one player on each of those roles, they would have developed a half-useful player, rather than no useful players. I think in their defense this stage, they had one of the toughest schedules. I think second toughest schedule.
Yeah, definitely a hard schedule.
Yeah, going into, like, any given match, even if they wanted to play DPS, they're still stuck playing goats 60% of the time. So maybe, like, 1 or 2 of the Koth points, like Rialto, Blizzard Bolt maps. So at the end of the day, if they want to win matches, and this goes for every team, they still have to play goats. So ultimately, they're still, obligated to practice that, and they're still going to want to do it. I think DPS is just objectively better on some points. That's why even teams that are good at goats are playing it. I also think that there's not much incentive if you're Vancouver or Shock to really play DPS in a sense, because you win every time you play goats anyway. So they're not obligated to do the best thing. They're not pushed in that direction. But DPS is probably just better 20-30% of the time. But I think, honestly, like, you have to look at that organ and ask yourself why they haven't changed players. Their roster is honestly disgusting. Like, their coaching stuff is a complete mess. They had 2 Korean coaches and Mesro, and then they put him on assistant GM and got Clockwork. And, like, I don't want to shit on Clockwork. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not. There's not enough time to say. But, like, nothing they're doing makes sense. And they're going bankrupt paying these players massive salaries to lose. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know where the issue is, like, where up the chain that is, but that organization is honestly frustrating.
See, my tactic here, by saying that I believe that they should add more support staff and coaches, because I think it's the players need to be given a fair shake. And so I think by adding more people to help them out, that would help them, give them a fair shake. Because I think they can do better than they did. I'm not sure. Obviously,
in what sense do you think they didn't get a fair shake?
I just think that they're understaffed at the coaching level, so the players aren't being given a lot of direction or a lot of help, or as much help as other teams. Many other teams have many more coaches, analysts. I mean, let's take the Dallas Fuel. They have 3 position coaches. They have a head coach. They have, I think, 4 or 5 offsite analysts that build databases for them. I mean, many teams have a lot of support staff, and I don't think that the Houston Outlaws currently are up there in the upper echelons. But I think the difficult thing is that if people are frustrated about my criticisms of Houston, and you don't take my approach of saying build out the support staff, then the only other logical conclusion is that you should just purge the team. Like, you can only take one of those opinions, right? There's no real, like, middle ground there. I don't think you can say at this point in time. I'm of the opinion that you try and make it work with what you have for the rest of the season and try and build out a more robust support staff.
Well, especially considering, obviously, like, the combined stage record now is 3-11, so you need a massive turnaround. Like, you basically need to win like 70% of your games from here on out.
I mean, it's not going to happen. No, it's clearly not going to happen. So I think at this point, you add support staff, figure out your structure for next season, and then see how well you can do for the rest of the season and make a more informed decision from there. But the other side of it is, like, you just light it on fire, right?
They should have already lit it on fire, is the problem. Like, they should have done that at the start of the season.
Valid
they didn't do that. But now they're in a situation where, yeah, obviously they can't flip the roster now. Like, that's fine. And they're trying to sell the org and all this stuff. I think when I look at that roster and the history of those players and their stuff, arguably Tyrone has a better track record than the players do, like to some extent. Not to like split them up, but they have 3 support staff. I mean, so do we, like I don't know, that doesn't seem like a good excuse. It might be a good solution, but I don't think that's the excuse. Granted, Tyrone built the roster, but maybe he didn't have full control over that, or I don't know.
What would you do, Babybay, if you had to fix the Outlaws? What would be the, like, someone comes along, obviously they have to give you money to be able to sign players or whatever, but what would be the move to make them a good team as soon as possible?
I mean, a couple more Koreans wouldn't be bad, I mean, of course.
They're playing their current Korean, so.
Yeah, well, but like, who do they have right now? Like Arhan, like.
Doesn't even know, hasn't seen him.
No offense, but I don't think he's like one of the Koreans that I have in mind. Not that I have a specific Korean in mind, but that you could definitely add some Koreans to that roster, and then it would make him stronger like instantly. And maybe the quality of their coaching staff isn't that great. Like I don't know personally, but if they're not able to learn anything, if that's the consensus we're getting to, and like they couldn't even find a Brig player, and they were swapping Zarya players too, by the way, like a lot.
They have 3 Zarya. They're one of 2 teams alongside the Hangzhou Spark that has played more than 25 minutes, I believe, on Zarya on 3 different players. So it's Linkser, Spree, and Dante. So let's talk about this. We haven't seen a lot of Dante recently. You are a former teammate of Dante's. Dante seems like a very good player. So
I don't know why they stopped playing him on Zarya. I don't think he got like even 1 grab eaten his entire time playing on Zarya. And like I play him in scrims, and his Zarya was pretty clean. Like it was fine. Like I
agree. Yeah.
I don't know why they would do that. I mean, I know Spree is like he's known for his Zarya, but like he needs to play D.Va, bro. Like I don't know. Like I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I don't even think Coolmat scrims. Like or not he scrims for sure, but I don't even see him on ladder ever, bro. Like this guy doesn't even play the game. Like I don't even know.
I mean, I think the argument is like, for me, what's weird is that their starting roster right now is Spree, Jake, and Coolmat, right? Which means that 100% that they are playing standard 3-3, right? Where think about this: if you didn't have Spree in there, then at least you could like sort of. Or if you did have Spree in there and you had, Dante's been playing a little bit of D.Va, not well, it has to be said. But if you took out Coolmat and you put in Dante, then you can have Spree flex between Zarya and D.Va, and you can have Dante flex between Zarya and Sombra. So at least you have some level of variation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they definitely could have ran like Sombra goats like Shanghai does, like, and you're bound to win at least
That's
one
what
series
I would argue.
Because if you run Sombra, like, you're going to have to win fights eventually, right, with the EMP. Like, you can complete a map. Yeah, I don't know.
At one point, yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, I think when they played against Titans and they played on Eichenwald, and they did actually do well with the Sombra goats, I think Shanghai is a really good example, because I think Shanghai is the team with the roster with strengths closest to the Outlaws, right? You're playing around a couple of DPS players. You're playing around potentially a very strong Sombra player, not maybe the greatest support line. Like, support could be said is the weakness of both of these teams. I mean, really, Shanghai is like the Ding Diem and Gamsu show. And so I could make an argument that they could have played strong Sombra goats around Muma and Dante. Potentially.
They would have to commit to the Sombra goats, though, because he can't swap back to D.Va, or it's not like good. I think that's a tough position for them. I'm also worried that there's internal issues. Like, it doesn't really make sense not to play Dante. He's probably their star player. So I feel like they started losing, and then they stopped playing Dante.
It's weird.
Dante wasn't the reason they were losing, so presumably there's some problem there.
I feel like it has to be a coaching thing, because I've played with Dante before, and like he's pretty fun to play with, man. Like I don't see like any of the players hating him. I mean, maybe I could be wrong. I don't know, but I don't think any of those guys on that team dislike Dante in any way, and it was more of like a coaching decision. Like,
The thing is that what I can't figure out about this team is, like, even though I haven't really seen them ever publicly address this much, they clearly don't want Korean players. That is like the way they've constructed the roster. They are obviously, it's one thing for the first season if you didn't want them and you thought we could make it work with all these really good Western players. Sure, it even did work to some degree. But the fact that they chose not to get anyone for season 2, so far they still have shown no indications they're going to get Koreans. Like, my problem with that is, like, if you add all the factors up, where do they think the solution is going to come from? Like, at the moment, forget the fact you couldn't win in GOATs. You also couldn't even find a stable lineup. That basically, to me, screams like insecurity from scrims. Like, that says you were doing scrims and like nothing was working. So you were like, fuck it, try something different next time. Does that not work? Well, try the next thing. And you just kept going like musical chairs style. So at the end of all that, realistically, what other Western players can you get that are going to come to this lineup? All the good ones are already taken. There's not really like many contenders players you'd look at and say, you've got to get this guy into the team. The obvious solution is get a big name Korean.
I mean, I'd ask Gunba to provide some like EU and NA contenders players, but Boston's already probably trying to contract those guys at the lowest possible value. So he'd have to give a critical scouting information for the Uprising.
We're scouting a lot of Pacific players these days. We've moved. I think it's possible Houston just don't use stats. They don't have some objective measure of like how often do they win with this player versus that player. It might be a very like friend-based team where it's about how people feel on the day or coaches going back and forth. They just don't really seem organized. I think that's why they're indecisive when it comes to roster decisions.
It's also I think one of the things that I don't know. I actually don't know which teams have this and which teams don't, but every team has access to it. So you guys get a sort of raw data dump from Blizzard, and basically it's just like a massive data file, and the Blizzard's just like, here you go, match data. And it's sort of up to the teams to parse it with analysts. Are you guys doing anything with that over there at Boston?
Okay, so I'm a software engineer before this.
There we go. Okay.
Convenient, right? I developed stats architecture for the team. So I did what Winston's Lab does with like computer vision, stuff like that. The problem is that you don't get that data for scrims, so it's basically useless for making decisions prior to the match, and in matches the sample size is so low on your team and on other teams. So we actually don't use that data at all. I'm sure some teams do. I'm sure it's valuable because I think it gives you data you can't get from computer vision, like how people use their abilities and positioning, and like you can make heat maps.
It gives you like a bunch of XYZ coordinates of like basically it is sort of what you would have in a raw replay file, but it's up to the teams themselves to parse this at the given time. So what teams do with it is very interesting. So
I think computer vision is probably the only thing you can do this stage until they give us that data for scrims. And computer vision's not a really common skill. It requires like actual development. I think only a few teams do it. So in their defense, not really that much accessibility stats-wise before they do matches.
I just like the way he actually implied that Outlaws, because obviously this is another concern, is it, with a team with a small coaching staff, is how much do the players get to say in all of this? Like, are they the ones determining some of these moves, or who stays in or who's out? Someone make a remade intro of Houston Outlaws using the old Friends template. And be like, so no one told you Goats was pretty hard to play. Where the fuck is Dante today? Whatever, I don't know. We'll come up with some lyrics later. We'll work on the lyrics, all right? We'll get the intro sorted there.
Stop it.
Exactly. Funnily enough, The Outlaws is my favourite American sitcom.
Western teams are often player run, which is a problem.
Sure.
I think they respect coaches as much going into teams from like high school or from their education. They're not as committed to it. I don't think it's as normal. So it's very common to have teams that are Western be more player run and like have players, starting to drive decision making.
Sure.
So one team that doesn't allow players to drive decision making is Huck's Empire, the Boston Uprising. And I think you guys have shown the effectiveness of that. So I told an anecdote, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, about how when Boston Uprising was bought by the Kraft family, I got a call from Jonathan Kraft because I was consulting with Blizzard at the time, and I had owned a professional team and run professional teams before. So he's sort of like picking my brain about how to structure the organization because he had no idea what he needed. And one of the things he said to me was that he really wanted like a strong central Bill Belichick type figure, and that the organization of the Patriots and all the Kraft Group teams has always been sort of like centralizing that culture and centralizing that power with somebody they can really trust. And Huck ended up being the person that they hired for this role. And from the outside, it looks like he's doing a very good job, especially with the resources that you guys have. You've also made a switch from the Valiant last season over to the Boston Uprising this season. So how has that been being inside the Uprising? Because, you guys tend to be pretty tight-lipped about things. There's not a lot of PR. It's a lot of focus on the game, and you sort of let the matches do your talking for you, and it's looked really good from the outside.
Yeah, well, we lost our last match, so unfortunately I have to come on here as pun. There's a lot to take in there. So I think from a Valiant perspective, I left the team. I felt like the org wasn't headed in the right direction. I feel like I didn't really have Noah's respect, especially. In hindsight, Moon and Noah both ended up, being fired or moved on. So everyone kind of lost in that whole situation. But I moved on to Boston. I felt like I chose Boston out of a couple of offers because I felt like I had the most to learn from Huck. Valiant I wouldn't say it was a player-run team, but it was a team where players had big personalities and they had a say in things, and people got to sort of vote in a way. And so I wanted to find an opportunity to learn from someone who could do the management side of things better, and Huck definitely does that. Whether it's financial stuff or running the team or roster decisions or dealing with personal issues, he's very good at that. He has taken a step back from last year and trusted the coaches more with the game knowledge stuff and making sure to do VOD reviews and that sort of thing. But it's been a big change, yeah, for sure. Like, it's a completely different team. But I think it's better in the long term.
Well, I mean, yours was one of the teams where people need to look at the strength of schedule to gauge this stage, because if you actually look at who they played, Monty, it's a pretty good stage overall. Yes, obviously losing to the Justice at the end is always going to look bad, and that will be memed on entirely. Don't worry about that. But aside from that, if you look at who they played, the teams they beat and the teams they lost make absolute sense. Like, actually, they were a pretty good team.
Yeah, I mean, you played some really like close games. Obviously, I'm sure you were not happy about the reverse sweep situations that you were in, which is probably, I know as a coach, is pretty tilt-inducing to like be like, why the fuck can't you guys just start doing this?
Why can't you just win normal, right?
Well, tell them, but they just lose. I don't know.
The halftime speech, man.
Yeah,
you guys must have a good one.
Not a lot of those. So I guess we can talk about that stuff, like the matches and how the stage went. I think we're a very lazy team, is how to put it. Like, we have a lot of rookie players. I think like 5 players of our team are rookies. People haven't really noticed that. AimGod played like 1 stage of Overwatch League, and then had like, the off-season went for 10 years. So realistically, Kellex is the only veteran player we have at the moment. And it shows, like, so especially when we have early matches, for example, I think the first Toronto match in stage 1, yesterday was like a 9 a.m. match. We show up with no sleep. People are tired. There's no energy, and especially when you're playing against a team that's worse than you. And like Atlanta, NYXL, like Gladiators, Boston, it works in our favor sometimes as well. It's very hard for the team that's better to be motivated going into the match and expect to have to try and stuff like that. I think that's where upsets come from. Like, I don't think we're better than Gladiators. I don't think Atlanta's better than NYXL. I just think when there's a big difference in power ranking, it's very difficult to convince the players that they need to give 100% from the start. And when you try and give 100% 3 maps into the series, maybe it's a bit late.
And that's why Shock is so good, dude. Like, those kids, like, they don't let up on the gas. Like, they're so hungry to win everything. Like, it's just, they're just so serious about it. And I think that starts with, like,
Good coaching.
Yeah, exactly. They like trained us that way, like even when I was on that team. That's how they bred us during that off season we had from like the first season to the second. It was like unbelievable.
Oh, yeah,
Even though, by the way, like obviously when you talk about the Shock streak, you have to add in their strength of schedule was they didn't play most of the top teams, the squads that people would expect to beat them. Even so, to just never lose a map is ridiculous. Like, that is so hard to do. It doesn't matter who you play. To 4-0 teams is very, very hard. So 4-0 everyone is ridiculous.
I really don't think it's going to happen ever again. Like, it's like I think Babybay saying it's so much of an issue of motivation and discipline to just keep on hammering on, even when you're already set up for the playoffs. You're already in that number 1 seed because of your map differential, and they just didn't give. I don't think they played great against Shanghai, but they also just didn't give up against Shanghai, right? They just kept pushing. And I think the Shock are so well run at this point in time that you really have to admire the organization as a whole because of this reason, right? Because of this discipline. It is, in my experience in esports, it is very rare, and maybe Thorin, you can talk about this, for a team to be this disciplined.
Oh, of course. Like that's actually one of the things that I always think supersedes any other markers of success. Because most of the things people consider success in life, like money or getting just women being attracted to you, etc., realistically are byproducts of hopefully improving something in yourself that then attracts these things to you, makes you a champion in the game. You would hope it would be like a byproduct. But a lot of people, sadly, that is the destination. Like when they get in the top team, when they get the top salary, when they win, they want like a rest. They want, oh, I've made it now. Oh, I'm here now. And that mentality is the one that makes even some very, very good players and competitors in history, they do let their foot off the gas a little bit. Or they do, you know, cruise. Like famously, what used to always happen in Counter-Strike when you had a different tournament every few weeks is whoever the number one team was, they would never come in the tournament in map 1 at 100% form and stomp the first person they played because they know they've got another tournament in a week and a half. So what you do instead is you sort of like, your first games against the lesser teams are your warm-ups, then finally you hit one good opponent, right? You try to come prepared for that game. Hopefully that's a great match. It gets you into it. The best teams literally used to just peak as the tournament went on. Like they'd be getting better in the semi-finals, then in the final, hopefully they're at their absolute peak, and that's where you see the best game. So that's why when you get a rare team, like at the moment in Counter-Strike, we have this with Astralis, where they basically come in at 100% level in almost every game. It almost defies belief, because you would even think for them, what is there left to prove? Like you're going to win the tournament anyway. You're 2-0 and everyone. But they're obviously going for like greatness. They're trying to be the absolute best you can be every round, every play. And you've got to have, crucially for me as well, a special team, because you kind of touched on it before. I would tie this into the whole Boston Uprising angle. It's about the culture of the team. Like what that would suggest to me is that within the San Francisco Shock, the coaching staff has a great mentality in this sense and has a way to sort of like keep you on track but not burn you out, not ride you too hard so that you don't feel like you have any breathing room. Likewise, the team structure. Yeah, they're paying you mega bucks, but it sounds like they actually hold you accountable for that. Like you actually have to perform at a really high level. You can't just fuck around. So yeah, anytime you get a streak like this, it's indicative of more than just being good at the game, because crucially, there's plenty of teams that probably had the ability to do something like this, but they would fuck around for one map, or they would just have a map where it didn't go their way and they were like, whatever, we're going to win this 1-3-1 anyway, who cares? Like, it wouldn't matter to most people. So to me, it's just the mentality it's indicative of. It's a very, very positive sign if you want to see this team maybe be a champion one day, because it looks as though even though they didn't play the NYXLs of the world this stage, they've got the wherewithal to be the best team, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's a big question. Obviously, because of the weakness of their schedule, we can't know. But I fully, they could definitely take out the Titans. Like, it's a possibility. They almost did it already. They've gone through another stage.
Yeah.
You think they'll win
this stage?
Yeah, I think so. I think you spend all that time fucking around and you throw maps all the time, you throw in scrims, you don't have that discipline, well, your talent's only getting you so far, your practice is only getting you so far. And like, I think there's no way logically that they're a good team or the best team towards the end of the league with that sort of approach to the game versus Shock, who's the complete opposite, tries all the time. Like, we played Vancouver Titans, I think, a week ago, and they were doing kind of bad, to be fair, but they just started throwing. Like, you just instantly see bump by DPS. That's just like, how are you being productive? Yeah, and then we started trolling. And
I actually heard that, like, if you're doing bad against them in scrims, they will actually like switch roles. Like, I heard this from a team. I'm not gonna say who told me this, but like, they will like literally switch their roles. Like, they'll have somebody else on Reinhardt.
Some of them.
Like,
I mean, they do
players
that
who always try.
I mean, they do that in pro matches too, when they start getting up in like time banks. You know, if they're in a time bank scenario where they have like 4 minutes of time bank and you have 0 minutes of time bank, we see them all the time. I know what they do. They'll switch bumper onto like Hanzo or Widow.
Yeah.
And they'll try and beat you. And then if you survive up until 2 minutes, 2 minutes is the magic timer while they change back to goats and then kick your ass. Like, it's pretty funny. Like, it's incredible. For me as a caster, it is hilarious and I enjoy watching it very much. But for me as a former coach, it makes me mad.
Yeah.
You said they switch bumper onto Ryan. I think onto Hanzo. I think bumper switches bumper onto Hanzo. I don't think the coaches think that's a good thing.
They let him know. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the same thing. They let him do that. There's the key aspect, you know.
And it is hard to say sometimes because
they are the two ends of the spectrum, though, Monty. And the problem is, as you said, depending on what hat you're wearing today, you have to appreciate both. because like it is cool that you can just style on someone if you really were going to win the match anyway.
Shit,
like on the one hand, I want you to do the Astralis/Shock approach and be like, no, come on boys, let's play the way we should do. This is the final now, you know, and you want them to just play the game out correctly. But if you can just do something that shouldn't even work, that's funnier. It is. It's also slightly disrespectful, which, I mean, I don't know if people are aware of this, but I like that. I fuck with that. That's my shit.
I also like it too. I think that's something that's really endearing about the Titans is their trash talking and their confidence. Like, they give great interviews. They're fucking hilarious. Like, I really like everything about that team.
I just love the way they've even like built themselves in all those posters as like Thanos or whatever. Like, they don't give a fuck. They're not even trying to go like the Korean humble route. They just don't give a fuck. I love it. It's the shit.
I know. If they stop winning though. Right.
I mean, sure. We'll see what happens.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
I mean, I think for now they're pretty safe, right? They built up enough of a record.
I think they secured the playoffs for the end of season.
For the season, yeah, probably at this point. I mean, they're 14-0 right now, so they would literally have to lose every game to go 50%, and then they would still be in the top. They would still be in the play-in. So.
Okay, so one of the things about the stage playoffs this time around is the bracket is even really nice to give us all these matchups that obviously have massive marquee value. So if you look, if Shock and London win their games against the Dragons and Spark respectively, which they would be expected to, then they will obviously play a series in the semi-finals. So what do you... London's not a... I mean, Shanghai Dragons, to be fair, not a team we focused on that much, actually. And kind of snuck in and themselves had not really the craziest schedule. If you look right, wasn't really that great. It's
reseeded, though. So...
Oh, right. I forgot about that, yes.
So actually, like, technically here, the Spitfire... Is that bracket? Yeah, I guess that bracket is right. So the Spitfire are the number 2 seed. So it will be reseeded based on results. So it's hard to say what matchups we're actually going to get. Especially because like the Gladiators could, I think, easily upset NYXL at this point in time.
I agree.
And yeah, I think obviously the Titans will proceed, but it could be something like it could be London, Vancouver in semis, and then Gladiators, San Francisco in semis.
Well, let's just go by the matchups then, and then doing so, we'll talk about each of the teams. So, since we talked about the Shock already, they play the Shanghai Dragons in the first round. As I said, Shanghai Dragons really lucky to be here. If you look at the strength of schedule, who they played, who else was close to maybe getting in if they hadn't have lost games at the end of the season, as we've discussed already. So, Babybay, what do you think of this one? Can the Shanghai Dragons, put it this way, be the first team to take a map off Shock this stage?
I think they can win a map, but I don't think they'll win a series. I mean, they could for sure win a map, but it was already kind of like they had like times where they kind of could have won a map the last time they played Shock. But I feel like that was more of because like Shock were thinking like we want to get this perfect stage record. Like you saw like some of their like I could tell they were kind of anxious when they were playing. You know, it wasn't like their usual play. I think that was mainly because they were like, damn guys, we got to get this 7-0 like no map. You know, yeah, I think they were just overthinking that. But I don't think they're going to care about that like perfect record now going into this playoffs. I think they're just going to want to win and make it past. So I don't think Shanghai will win, but I think they can win a map.
Any stylistic reason, Gunba, that Shanghai Dragons have a shot?
No, I think Sombra Goats is something that's just fundamentally flawed. It's like you're inviting the other team to play solitaire. There's so much counterplay to it, and the Sombra Goats runs out of things to do. Like there's only so much you can do with Sombra Goats when the Zen's hiding, you know?
Someone writing these down, that was pretty good actually. It's like inviting the other team to play solitaire. That's pretty good actually.
That's why no one plays it anymore, right? But like I guess they want to make their roster work or something. It does get them some people complain about it. I think justifiably so. It's kind of cheap. I think it's a good way to transition DPS into Sombra Goats. I can say that because stage is over anyway. But yes, it's not a good long-term plan. They're obviously just trying to make this stage work, and that's fine, I think. But they were
Monty, I've just realised the whole time the plan was there. It was in front of my eyes. I just didn't see it. I couldn't see the light. Which is, I know what the Houston Outlaws did, and they're fucking geniuses. Because they saw what happened to the Fuel when the Fuel lost all those games. Everyone started hating on players. Everyone started theory crafting whose fault it is. Well, if you swap everyone in and out, you literally load bear all the responsibility to everyone. They can't fire everyone. So then logically, it's no one's fault, is it? It can't be one person's fault. That's actually genius, yeah.
You just spread a thin layer of blame over everybody on the team.
And then at the end, just fire Dante alone and just go and see he didn't even get much playing time. It's obviously his fault in the end after all, wasn't it? Like, there we go. That's perfect. They've wrapped it all up nice and neat for you there.
I can see the Houston Outlaws management coming in, the ownership, and saying, all right, who's responsible? And then it's one of those I am Spartacus moments where everyone's just standing up.
All right, I've heard that this team doesn't have a good Brigitte. Stand up, whoever was playing Brigitte here. Right, this isn't a joke. I want the real person to stand up now. All right, and who was on Zarya then? Because you're fired, whoever that was. Right? Be serious now. I want to know, like, genius, isn't it? They actually did, Monty. That's how close this team were. They really were friends. They were more than friends. They were a band of brothers. And they wouldn't just let one of their brothers go down without a fight. They're going to fight together. They win together. They lose together. Well, they always lose together. They're always together, though. That's the thing. There we go. Right.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, it's just something that came to me for a moment there. So anyway, one team actually that we only have a team to talk about in passing, but they are going to have some stage playoff time, is the Spark. So Spark plays against the London Spitfire. Let's go the other way then. So Monty, start us off on this one. London Spitfire, much improved from stage one. Are they going to just clean up with the Spark?
They lost to Chengdu, though. So the weird thing about London is that I think they're a very motivation-based team. And, when they're playing well and they're feeling good, obviously they can beat anybody. They're always going to be dangerous, London, because they're on an individual pound-for-pound, player-for-player perspective. They are one of, if not the best team in the league. So it's usually about their coordination and teamwork that I think is lacking. In the Chengdu game in Dallas, they sort of reverted to what I saw in stage one, which is that when they start to lose like a team fight, what ends up happening is all of the players start to try and make like hero plays. And so instead of just resetting and trying to fight the way they should in GOATs, they'll start to just try and trickle onto the point one by one, and they'll lose like a minute or two just trying to make the hero play instead of just doing the smart thing. So London, they look good now. After the loss to Chengdu, I would say their last week ended up being pretty convincing. They absolutely dumpstered the Outlaws in the last week of competition. So we'll see what they can do. They could win the whole thing as usual. You remember me saying this last year in the season playoffs. I was like, well, London's in, so they're perfectly capable of winning everything if they manage to click at the right time.
What do you think, Gunba?
I think so. Like we're talking about Vancouver and Charlotte being like opposite ends of the spectrum from like a disciplinary standpoint. I think London and NYXL are on the opposite ends of the spectrum from like an effort standpoint. So NYXL come into every season and they grind for like months before everyone else does. They're like the first team to scrim, first team to finalize their roster. They start with this massive advantage. They just have this teamwork that no one else has. They understand the comps. And then they just fall off a cliff. Like over time, you just see them start to lose matches more and more. Like Babybay's been there firsthand. Valiant last season, we saw that as well, like by the end of the season. And I don't know if this has been talked about from season one, but NYXL were horrible compared to Valiant at that time. Like it wasn't even close. If we scrimmed them or played a match against them, it was really one-sided. So like NYXL work really, really hard, but maybe don't have the ability to learn as well as other teams. London are the complete opposite, right? They come into every season terrible, and it's just like how fast can they ramp up?
I agree with that.
Recently, from like
they won stage one last year. To be fair,
yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Oh, they did, yeah. Oh, that was crazy too. How they did that.
That doesn't agree with my narrative, so just don't mention.
If anything, London got worse, and they missed the last two stage playoffs in 3 and 4.
Yeah, I think. To be fair, it was a meta that they'd won. The contenders finals on, right? There were 2 championship rosters of it. I think a big thing for London is like recently they've been playing so well. It's actually insane. Like they're really, really good. Like I'm not sure where they stand in the top 3 anymore. I mean, obviously I haven't scrimmed them recently, but they are very good.
Are they in the top 3 or the big 3 as it has been dubbed?
Almost surely, yeah.
Really?
Should it be a big 4 now?
Well, NYXL is falling out of the big 3.
Gladiators. I mean, we beat Gladiators, so.
Okay.
I've scrimmed against both these teams like a lot, like especially recently, like Spark and London, and it's like this thing where it's like the Spark are so good and clean, like they play so clean, like just good fundamental goats in scrims, and then I watch them in their match, and I'm like, why are you guys not playing like you played against us in scrims? Like it's just crazy. Like they actually play so good in scrims, and then I watch their matches. I don't know if it's like they just like lose it during matches, I think. And like London is a team that will just clutch if they want to, right? Like you said, Monty, like they can they have the potential to win whenever they turn that switch on, dude. So the series is going to be good. Like, I don't know. I don't even know who's going to win this series. I want to say that I don't even know who has the advantage, because I've just seen how the Spark can play, like when they're really on point, and like they play some clean goats. And I don't think that we should keep in mind too much of the Chengdu match, because like the Chengdu match against London, because you can't really prepare for Chengdu, man. Like, it's like just awkward. You know what I mean? Like, and they're gonna be playing like a mirror. It's gonna be goats that entire series, I guarantee it. So
I think Hangzhou have a problem where they have a full rookie team. So Hangzhou goes into every match, and the more important the match is, the more they're going to choke. And I think stage playoffs is tough. London's the opposite, right? They're super experienced. They're going to be better in this situation. I think that's the big difference maker for me.
That's fair enough. But I think we can all agree that there is a potential dark horse stage winner that could come out of that match. Depending on
fucking nuts.
Yeah, that guy's real good.
So then we come to.
I don't see Spark winning the stage. I don't see Spark winning. I can see London winning the stage if they really, really turn it up, but I don't think Spark could be the dark horse.
So then, as you've already hinted at earlier, though, the matchup between NYXL and Gladiators is the real can go either way match, right?
I think this
can go to the semis.
I think there's a time where New York has to prove that they're not washed or something.
We have to talk about your 2 wins against New York as well. And there's obviously been, I've talked to a lot of people now about New York's style and how it's always functioned, which has been very defensive, peeling for JJoNak, waiting for JJoNak to make the play. And in a world where the best teams are playing a very aggressive version of GOATs, there's not often a lot of time anymore to make those plays. And I think that their style that they have always operated on since the beginning of Overwatch League is starting to fade out in terms of usefulness. I think they're more vulnerable to Sombra because of how slow they play than most other teams. It allows Sombra to set up. I think that's how Seoul beat them in the semifinals, or in the semifinals of last stage, or quarterfinals rather of last stage. What was when you go into these matches, now that you beat them twice, which is quite the accomplishment, Babybay, what were you noticing about New York, and what do you think was the key for the Reign to beat them back to back?
I mean, I just feel like, they especially the first match we ever had against them, I knew there's no way these guys are going to prepare for us. There's just no way. Because I know New York, everybody knows New York. They always lose to teams that they shouldn't be losing to, right? Quote unquote, shouldn't be losing to. And it's because they always prepare against all the best teams, right? And they don't think about the teams that aren't on their level. So just that, and us bringing this aggressive fire, and just not giving them respect. Why should we respect this team? When they clearly don't respect us, so we're gonna do the same to them. So that's the mentality I had. We don't care that they're in New York. We're gonna go into here and we're gonna play our game. I don't care what game plan they're gonna do. We're gonna roll these kids, and that's exactly what we did. So it's I don't think that their slow play style, it's good to play slow sometimes, but you can't always play slow. You got to take space sometimes. And if you take the space from New York, they kind of just crumble. And then you start to see this chain of mistakes. Our last match against them, JJoNak used trance when they were down 3 guys because we put so much pressure on them. And once you see that happening, once I saw that happen in our last match, I was like, these guys are afraid right now. They're choking again, you know what I mean? It's just
Starship Troopers moment.
I could just tell from the first map, they won the first fight, right? They were doing good. Something goes wrong. JJoNak for some reason wants to compensate, pops trance 3v6. And in my head at that moment, I'm like, these guys are scared of us. They're gonna lose.
To be fair, JJonak's weakness was always his trance usage, which is super important in this meta. So sorry to interrupt you. But JJonak's style, people need to understand that he was always weak at trance timing, but it didn't matter before because trance was less important. The most important thing a Zenyatta can do in this meta is press Q at the right time. Getting picks is awesome, but trance timing is mega important in this meta right now. What say you, Gunba?
The data. I'm just looking at the Zen data. I think I don't think JJoNak is a top 5 Zen right now. Like, I just don't think that's the case. I don't think you can say that, like, looking at any of the objective facts, right? Like, he's someone that came in with, like, multiple MVPs. He's this, like, star player, and their style worked because they played around him. I don't know if I necessarily agree that pressing Q at the right time is the most important thing for Zen. Like, yeah, it's more important now than it was, and he's obviously weak in that area. He's always been weak in that area. But I think he's honestly getting worse in other ways, other than trans. Like, I just think he's not the kind of player you can build a team around at the moment, and that's what they've done since the start. So they're kind of fucked in that way. They have to find something else.
Wouldn't they, though, as a team, Gunba, be one of the teams that if they just chose to recognize that, like if they agreed with your assessment, basically, they have the pieces to switch up and be a completely different type of team with the same players, right?
I mean, I guess, like, Mecha is also not performing that well, though. So it's like the two arguably biggest people on the team in terms of performances just aren't there anymore. Like, I don't know, like, how, like, Mana's doing really well, but
sure,
main tanks don't look good when their teammates aren't performing well.
Well, also, Mono's a very low resource tank because everything goes into JJoNak, right? Which is also why I think Mono's looking worse, is because teams, Babybay, what it looked like to me when you guys were playing against the NYXL was that you guys were jumping on top of JJoNak, forcing them to use a bunch of resources like Brigitte packs and everything on him, and then you would just turn on Mono and Meko and destroy them.
Yeah. I mean,
like you forced them to blow cooldowns on JJoNak, and then
I meant to say Meko is not performing well, not Mana. Sorry, Mana's performing very.
Yeah, no, you said that's what you said.
Okay, good. So you said
no, I said Mono doesn't look like from a late perspective because he does die a lot, but I don't think it's his fault.
That's the problem with like the New York play style. It's like, when you play that slow, like, and you let the other team make the first move, like I'm able to, even just like right-clicking JJoNak across the map because you're playing so slow, they got to use the Brig E on him. But like when their play style is just like they try to be too perfect, and when you're too perfect, like it's just so much easier for things to go wrong, dude. Like look at Titans, dude. You think they're like trying to play the slow, methodical, like it's like a chess. Like New York's trying to play chess, and like Titans is just like punching through the chessboard into your face.
Hungry hippos.
You know what I mean? Yeah, hungry hippos. Like, oh, you're playing chess? We don't care what you're playing, bro. Like, I'm punching you in the face right now. Like,
yeah. Also an underrated strategy in Hungry Hippos, because remember, you can obviously influence the game by touching players outside of the game. So you elbow them, everyone knows you tip the game board so they all run down to your part. We all know the tricks. We all know how to hustle someone out of 100 playing Hungry Hippos. Anyway, so what about on the other side of this equation then? Because the team they're playing, the Gladiators, is obviously a team that's been held in high regard. You were implying that you think they're going to win this match, so... Monty,
what I love about this conversation is like we have one guy from Atlanta who just beat the NYXL, and then we have one guy from Boston who just beat the Gladiators, who hopefully, you guys can give us some insight into how you guys beat these teams.
Yeah, let's do that then. Go on then, Gunba. How do you beat the Gladiators?
I mean, I think our team usually wins matches when we try, so I think that helped. It's a match that obviously we came a little bit nervous for, so I just think trying when you're playing your opponent usually results in wins, right? Especially if Gladiators didn't prepare for us. I think we did a really good job of identifying their playstyle, which I don't really want to say anything about because it's kind of BM, but since they still have to play a stage playoff, obviously. No, I mean, the playstyle's fine. I just mean, if I say that, I don't know if NYXL watched this, but we did a really good job of identifying how to beat their playstyle and like how to play around their players and the things that they were bad at, things that they were good at. And we just focused on the right things that week. I think it lined up with the match really well. There wasn't anything like really specific. I just think people were really motivated. We had a great week in practice. We lose like 90% of our scrims, and that didn't happen prior to this match. So,
but based on what you said earlier, you actually think that Gladiators, like you said, if you were having a big 3, big 4, whatever, like actually you would take NYXL out and put Gladiators and was the other team? Who was the other one that was entering?
No, London.
Oh, Spitfire, right? Yes, sorry. So yeah, between these two teams, between these two, who do you actually think is not just in the matchup, but overall, who is the better team out of Gladiators and NYXL for you?
NYXL. I think they both play the same style. So the problem is that NYXL is better at that style.
Okay.
I would argue that the Gladiators have a lot more looks, though, and they're a much more surprising team, especially in terms of they have some very like wacky strategies on certain maps. Like they'll run Bastion attacks on Blizzard World. They'll run May defenses on Hanamura. So I think they're sort of I'm impressed you guys took them out because I think they're sort of I don't think they prepped a lot for you, to be fair, but I think that they are like a tricky team. And whenever we see them come into important matches, like you guys, I think their coaching staff does a very good job of tailoring strategies to their opponents. And that's why I think, given NYXL's current form, that the Gladiators coaching staff is going to be able to put together some really cool shit for this matchup.
I guess NYXL in playoffs as well has always been terrible. I'm changing my mind.
Exactly.
I think that if the Gladiators come in and they're like scared of the name NYXL, they're not going to do well. But if they come in and they're like, they just come in with the notion like, oh, Atlanta Reign beat these guys 2 times already, like we can do it, and they play like their game to their strengths, like I think that they can win.
Yeah, I really like the Gladiators just in the same way that I like Boston, which is that I feel like I'm going to get a nice surprise when I watch them every map. They're not going to be the Toronto Defiant, the most boring team to watch in the league.
Entertainment value, yeah.
And what?
Entertainment.
Yes, entertainment value, but also just it's much more fun to watch when you get to see the intelligence and the specific choices made by a team. We've referenced the Uprising a lot on this podcast because you guys have a very low team fight win rate, yet you have a pretty good record. And I've talked to Shake privately on different occasions and some of your players, and it's been fun to sort of talk to them about your set strategies, because you guys run like some wacky set plays that are very effective. Or Fusions is an excellent shot caller, and he'll make a change in game, like based on your time bank or whatever. You'll play at different, like weird spots on the map. Because you got to get more time off the clock. And
you mean Gibraltar? Is that the example?
Gibraltar, yeah, you did it on Gibraltar.
That was entirely on RTK, to be fair. Just to give him credit.
Oh, all right, fair enough. Yeah, I know from talking to them that Fusions has done it on Anubis as well.
Yeah.
So I think you guys, I like you because you're a very cerebral team and you do a lot with the pieces that you have.
Teamfight win rate in scrims is worse than on stage, if you can believe that. Like, honestly, it
so
doesn't make any sense.
What is it about Boston? You say, because you've said a lot of interesting stuff, like you've got a lot of rookies, which is true, and you say like if your guys try. So what's the? Isn't it up to you, the coaching staff, to convince them to try? Is that on you a little bit?
Try my best. I think a big part of it, and I think that like some teams have an advantage over, and something we've realized in hindsight, I think, is like. People give us a lot of shit for our housing conditions for whatever reason. You know, like we put all our players in camps, and you know they don't get food and they don't have beds, you know, whatever. Like whatever the memes are saying. But I honestly think giving players apartments results in less discipline because we don't see the players for half of the day. They don't see each other. So like making them wake up for a 9 a.m. match is very difficult. I think that's a huge thing, honestly. Like we've lost multiple matches to not getting enough sleep for a really early match. It's a common problem, and we haven't lost that many matches, like 7, so it's a big issue, I think.
Sure. Because, you know, actually, I'll tie this into, actually, again, the kind of the theme of what I was talking about when I was referring to the shock earlier, and how incredible their, like, focus was through the whole stage, and how they kept it up. Even if it was a team that wasn't even a good team, they still obviously did their homework, tried to 4-0 them. They did everything they could. Well, the problem with that as well is, it's very easy as an outsider to say, this is the correct way to do things. Everyone should do this. But, like, even if teams wanted to do that, some teams don't have the personnel. Like, they don't have the right players who would do those sorts of things. Because in Counter-Strike, we have the same thing happening also currently, which is, as well as being an incredibly dominant team, the Astralis team that's currently on top in CSGO also can boast the same things. They have, like, a dietitian that makes sure they all have really great diet. They exercise. Like, none of them are out of shape. They have an office they go to play from where you kind of like held accountable for what time you're there and what you do with your time. And that all sounds great. But whenever everyone says, why don't all the other teams do that? It's like, mate, if you could even get the coaching staff that had the idea to do that, you couldn't implement that with some players. There are some players where you actually don't want to make it that restrictive because it will ensure that guy is going to be a problem in your team. Like, if your best player, and it really is the star player, is the guy who can't get up for 9 a.m., I'm sorry, in your team, you're going to have to make the rules different about what time you wake up, right? It's not as simple as just say, you know, everyone be like a model athlete. Because let's face it, in traditional sports, there's some people who don't go the whole hog in that sense. There's some people who just do the hours that they're, you know, asked to play, and they get their points, and they're just a member of a team. It's okay. So what do you think on this topic, Gunba? Because it's obviously not as easy as just telling everyone do all this great shit, right?
I think it's something you have to build over time. I think it's something culturally that has to be supported by like facilities and stuff like that. Like and that's something we're working towards, right? Of course, like we're aware of that. Yeah. We have a lot of rookies. That's fine. We have, I think, the easiest stage of any team in any stage in stage 4. So like we do have that sort of buffer. We play like the 5 worst teams back to back for 4 weeks straight. But I think ultimately it's still on the coaches. Like it's on the coaches to build that culture over time. Like it's constantly reinforced. But internally, what that looks like is after the Washington match, I yelled at the players about it, 100%. Like, if you're a coach doing a good job of reinforcing that, you effectively have to put it on the players, and then you take responsibility at the end for the outcome. And I guess that's what we're doing. Yeah.
I also think, Thorin, there's a difference. Like when you talk about some of these Counter-Strike guys, it's important to note that they're generally older, and so they have survived that long. And generally, as you age, you can become more self-disciplined. I think one of the issues for the Overwatch League is most players are like, probably the average age is like 20 or 21. Many players have many teams have, I think the Shock have it. What was your team's average age, Babybay? Wasn't it like 19 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was like 19 or maybe 20. Might have been 20.
Yeah, really young though.
I think there's another team, and that was with me on it. I'm 23.
Yeah, so you're one of the older players on that roster. And I think like in general, if you are dealing with a very young team, it can be. It's just interesting how this discussion has been shifting over the years, because a few years ago, teams, when I owned a team, we had to have a team house just purely for financial reasons, because it was the best way. It was the cheapest way to house players. But also the logic is it gives you, we had a house cook preparing meals for the players. It's the easiest way to control their diets. It's the easiest way to control their schedules, like you're saying. But some players, as they get older, obviously want to live on their own, and they know the schedule, know the discipline, and they know what's expected of them, and they can go in and live on their own, and it's okay. But I think now what teams are finding in Overwatch League, many teams have tried apartments, and many teams have now gone the other way back into a team house, which I find very interesting, because there was a lot of criticism of team houses as being too intense, not giving.
The idea was it promoted more burnout, and
yes.
like even on an emotional level, not even just physically.
Because you can't get away from your teammates, right? There's like no way to take a break if you need it, to have some level of separation if you're frustrated, right? It's your work just becomes your life, which is sort of esports, regardless of where you're living, I would argue. But it's just fun to hear you saying that you think the team house environment would be better. And I do think, like, for the most part, for young players who are coming in at 18, 19 years old, I do think that it's better for them.
The league format also changed, to be fair. Like, it's shorter, and you need better results in a shorter period of time. So, like, I think that changed. Like, Valiant's also apartments-based, right? And Valiant was great. This season, not so much, right? So I think burnout's less of a risk now with the new structure, and discipline is a big issue, right? I also think that, I think Thorin mentioned this. We kind of didn't cover it, but, like, selecting the right players helps a lot. It's a huge deal. Like, you have to pick people who are 100% committed to Overwatch. Like, I don't have a life. Like, I only care about Overwatch. Sure. The players that succeed will do that, right? Like, Colorhex is a player like that. He's a player that came in from Australia.
He's New Zealand, right?
Well, whatever, same thing. It's a state.
Okay.
Sorry, when I say Australia in the context of Overwatch, I'm usually mentioning contenders, but yeah. All right. It's so much effort to say. Anyway, but he's someone that's 100% committed to Overwatch. Like, he really wants to win, and you see that. Like, he came in, he wasn't performing that well, hadn't played Xayah, wasn't a main DPS, and now he's one of the more consistent players on our team. That's what happens when you're that kind of player that just only thinks about the game. Sure. You have to find people like that, right?
That's why I always get so triggered by all these teams in esports, where you can tell the guy who's like the PR guy has just read a bunch of like middle management fucking books on how to like run an office, and so he's just spewing all this like fucking PR speak of like, we have strong corporate values here at I'll make up a team, the LA not Valiant, and our players must represent these values because they are very important to our vision of the direction. It's like all fucking buzzwords. Well, the problem with that is, right, the reason they say all that shit is because at heart, they're actually right. Like, if you actually can make a team, like we were talking about the Patriots, I'd argue the Shock must have done this, where you've created a real culture, and the culture is something like excellence, or being your best every day, or performing at a high level, or being focused. If you really can get the personnel who then match to that, or adapt to it and embrace that, that is when you will get an amazing team, because you really will have like a core strength that runs through everyone, and hopefully this is also what I think it's worth doing, is then you have like another criteria when you're looking at players to decide from. You're not now just looking like, well, how sick is this tank player, or how good is this DPS? You can also ask yourself like, well, in my particular team, I've built my team, for example, in Boston's case, maybe it's around being very coachable. So for example, if I have an option between one tank and Fisher, I'm probably not going to pick Fisher if it's the Boston Uprising recruiting to, even though I've no doubt Fisher might be the better player in that trial just as a tank player. So I think that's another reason why, on the one hand, I hate the people who are kind of like the snake oil merchants in that sense, because I think that they're going to make other people think that that's not a real thing. It is. It's just there's a lot of like people who are like pretending like that's what they're doing, whereas the teams that really do have that kind of a culture and legit values that they've decided on, they can be different depending on the team, you know. Like, for example, I could imagine a team that goes the route of like sports franchises like the Lakers, where the idea is instead like, you know what, actually we don't make it about being the most coachable player, we don't make it about being the guy who's the most disciplined. On our team, what we do is we just pay you the top salary and you better fucking win the championship or you're out. Like, that's another kind of culture you can create as well, and that can have its own success. You've seen that in many different games as well. So like, I just hate the people who are like basically the not Valiant guy that I'm referring to there. He's like the equivalent of one of those like insects that can pretend to be a really dangerous predator, but he's not actually the predator. So, you know, stay in your lane is all I'm saying. You know,
I'm gonna talk.
You'll be in and out of this business faster than fucking a lot of people. Okay, so
I think Gunba's touching on something too that's really important about the dedication to Overwatch, and I know that this is a very sensitive topic, so I'm going to try and discuss it sensitively, as best as I am capable of that. But there is an issue where I think the public doesn't really understand the kind of determination that it takes to be a truly great professional athlete or competitor or esports player. And I think the fundamental problem is that there have been players who have burned out or had, you know, legitimate. I'm not trying to say that, you know, that mental health issues don't arise, and I do think the teams should address them as best as they can. But the thing about coming into Overwatch is that people don't understand that the people in the league who are the pro players are so incredibly fucking determined and will spend literally every second of their time trying to get better at this game. And I don't think that most people can understand that level of drive. And so most people prefer to have a healthy work-life balance. That's not really possible as a top athlete or as a top professional esports player. And that just comes with the territory. And you have to find those people who are just so uniquely single-minded that they are going to strive for that level of excellence no matter what. And it is a crushingly difficult thing to do, and that's why you see some players burn out. That's why you see issues, you know, with players like Effect and Defran, who I do believe were given the best support that they could have been given in this thing. But it's not a fault of the teams; it's a fault of the literal job, and that's what the job is. And if you are not going to grind day in and day out, somebody else will, and somebody's going to be fucking better than you. And that's all there is to it.
You're not doing it, somebody else is going to do it. That's like the crazy thing about this league.
Especially
you as like a Western player, dude. You're playing against robots, dude. Like Korean robots, dude. Come on, man. Like if I slack off for even like a day, I already notice. Like, maybe one day is okay, but like 2 days off, I come back, I play a scrim, I'm like, okay, god damn, I'm getting clapped right now. Like, it's so hard.
Yeah, and the thing about Koreans is it's part of their culture to practice constantly. Like that is drilled into them in school from a very young age. So there is a cultural aspect to the Koreans that says the more you practice, the better you're going to be. So they'll just practice all the time, and that's what makes them fucking good. And I'll
tell everyone a really tragic anecdote, right? And I don't remember the year, but you can look this up. It's actually a famous story. There was a story, I'm off the top of my head, I'm going to say it was maybe like 30 years ago now, in the Olympics, where two athletes, I believe they were from Japan, actually, they were track athletes. I think they were in like some sort of running race. And when they finished silver and bronze medal, they committed suicide after this like Olympics or something along those lines. Now, not only does that show like what an utterly different mentality, because think about it, right? If you're a Westerner, everyone knows there's a famous like almost like comedic way of describing the medals, right? So gold medal, obviously that's the one you go in for that you want. Silver medal's like, fuck, I should have got gold, I could have got gold. And then the joke is bronze medal, it's like, at least I got something. You know, I didn't get first or second, but fuck it, I got third, right? The point is, in our society, we can even sort of accept being second as long as you were like still very good. Like, I was close, I'll get him next time. The mentality in some other cultures, though, is it's first or nothing. Now, the reason why I brought up that anecdote is because on the one hand, it's certainly depressing that these people killed themselves and had that much pressure on themselves. You'd hope that isn't the case. That's the extreme end of it. But the almost like gallows humor aspect is like, turn to each other. What do you had to come second? This is madness. We can't do this. Like, only one of you could have got. Even if the other guy hadn't won, what was one of the other two are you going to do? Like, the point is, that's the extreme end though of what otherwise is what makes people in these cultures win. Though is that it's like the idea is everyone's going for the top spot, and again, that ties back into what I was talking about before. Every pro player knows in interviews to say, well, we're going for the championship this season and we're trying to, like, everyone can say that, but they don't show it in their practice. They don't show it in the way they play the game. They don't show it when they're 2 games down at the beginning of the split and they know, fuck, it's probably over already. Like, those players give up. They aren't the ones that are still going like 100%. Because that's the other factor about this sort of like dedication that is really misunderstood by fans. Is everyone's seen the movie where the guy who was the champion boxer has to go on the comeback route to get back to the top. He at least was a champion. He at least believes it's still possible. What about the guy who hasn't even got to the championship yet? He just lost his first 3 fights. Well, that's the guy who wouldn't keep practicing diligently, is it? That's the guy where the coaching staff's going to fucking earn their paycheck if they can keep this guy on track or get him back in the game or make him believe he can still win. That's the time when the culture aspect really kicks in for me. It's like, it's one thing if you have the best team. Now you're just trying to get those guys to the 99th percentile. If you have the team where the moment you're showing 10% of what you're capable of, you're not getting what's happening in scrims into the actual matches. Good luck trying to keep those players dialed in every game. Trying to get that guy who's, in fact, good luck trying to get the guy who's trying to fight just for a spot to get on the starting lineup in a team that's losing to keep practicing. Like, this is all like the trickle-down aspect that must be so difficult to keep players on board with. Because we generally just focus on the best players. Like, yeah, we can see their storylines, their motivations. What would you say, Babybay? Obviously, you've been in a couple of teams that have had at times good results, bad results. What's it like within the pro community?
I mean, everything you said literally happened to me last season. Like, I came into the season with like super high expectations. I was like grinding so hard, and then like when he actually started playing and like the matches just didn't go our way, and like, you know, we didn't have good records, I like, you know, I was depressed and I like let off the gas and I stopped doing my stuff, and like that made me such a bad player. Like stage 2, I had some of the worst games I've ever played in my career of Overwatch. I was playing so bad and I just kept down, like it was like a downhill spiral, dude. And it all stemmed from like after the first stage, I noticed like I stopped going to practice 2 hours early. Before the first season started, I would show up 2 hours before everybody and work on my aim, work on all this stuff. Maybe watch a VOD for like 30 minutes or something like that. That was my dedication for like the entire first stage. And after that first stage, I stopped showing up 2 hours early. I was showing up just on time for practice, just like no warm up going into scrims, stuff like that. And you know, eventually it got me benched because like I just, you know, I clearly didn't have the drive to like, you know, do good. And you know, being benched after that, like I got like a little bit of a break, and then, you know, the coaching staff changed a bit and like I started getting serious. So I was like, well, you know, like what am I doing? Like why am I here if I'm not going to put it everything, you know, put in everything. So sure. After that third stage went by, I just like I got this like new motivation ever since then. Like, you know, thank to Crusty. Crusty helped me a lot with my confidence and my play and all that stuff. He like kind of like he saw the potential in me, and like he was like he remembered like the first time I played them against Boston. I like dominated them pretty much, right? I like carried the series, and he was like where did that drive go? You know, he had like a conversation with me. It was like everybody used to like really fear who you were, you know, like even if your team wasn't that great, everybody still like talked about you all the time, like you were such a great player, and then you just like stopped. Like, what did you do? Like, why did you stop? You know, why did you stop your drive? So, you know, ever since I had that conversation with him, it really turned me around, and I was like, you know, why am I here if I'm not going to give it my all? So,
sure. Yeah, I remember your first match. I mean, I think 100% agree. I think like you came into the league with like huge expectations, doing great, and then fell off. And that's what happens. Literally. And I think that's what experience is, right? Like you have to do that and go through that process and fail, and then you have to come back, right? I think rookies don't have that, especially at Boston. If we win a match against a good team, Gladiator is a great example. There's going to be an instant fall off because we're content, right? We've achieved something, and that's something that stops happening with experience and good coaching. I think I've kind of soured on coachability a bit. I think work ethic is more important.
I think.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, to just wrap this up, I think a lot of fans don't understand what people are going through, and they demand a lot of the teams and the players, not knowing that it's an experience unlike anything that they will ever be able to understand. And it's like, it's not the fault of the teams if players are burning out. Like, it just takes a ton of motivation to just even stick in this thing. So,
like when you said before about like fan expectations, I would define it as this is the problem. Is like fan expectations are along the lines of like, well, it's your job. Of course you should do it. It's like, you know what, mate? If people treat this as just a job, you will get the kind of lackadaisical player we're talking about who turns up, he does X hours, he does whatever, he's told he has to do, and then he plays the match. That player isn't going to be a champion. He's not going to be in the best team, and his team won't be the best. The people who are going to be the best, they are basically people, like Monty said, who are foregoing that whole like dream of healthy work-life balance and saying, actually, I'm willing to sacrifice a lot of my life in order to get more success in the game. And the notion really is what Babybay agreed with, which is if you aren't doing it, the problem is you just know there's another guy who is. Like, if the NYXL take the night off, they know the London Spitfire or whoever else is the one practicing that night, and that might be the little edge that helps them out or might get them a little bit sharper. And so it's basically unfortunate at this point in time until we get to a point where, like, the only thing that will change it, just to kind of like start to wrap it up, the thing that I think will change it one day, Monty, is one of these days when enough money is invested in these games where we know it, like a player can be worth, like they are in sports, hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, there's a reason why in American football, they'll only let you train a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Like they don't want the running back to be running all the time and just wear his career lifespan down. So in the same sense, one day, I don't know who it's going to be, someone's going to figure out for the mind, when does the muscle break in the metaphor? When do you get worn out? How much can you actually put up with? And once you actually, because this is the problem, you will have to actually mandate that players practice less. Otherwise, these Koreans are just going to fucking whack it out the park 14 hours every day. Like, you're not going to get to anyone else. You can convince everyone else that's the right thing to do, right? Fucking Reader's Digest articles about, have you thought about healthy? But it's like, that isn't going to matter. There's going to be some Korean guy who is going to do the 15 hours a day. So at the moment, it's like some sort of fucked up game of chicken to see who can just burn themselves out or become the best player ever. So on the one hand, as long as I'm not the one having to do it, love to see it. Let's have these guys just destroy themselves in some sort of human demolition derby to be the best fucking Overwatch video game player ever. For me, that's awesome. I get to just watch it and love it. To actually do that, I don't know if any human should have to do that. That's kind of like on cruel and unusual punishment, in my opinion.
Agreed. I mean, it is amazing to watch, but because there aren't physical limitations on the game, you can play 14 hours a day. You can't play 14 hours of basketball a day. So there is more time for work-life balance. But I think the fans, they like to pat themselves on the back and say like, oh, good for this team for getting help for this player. But I think fans need to understand that fundamentally, here's what you are rooting for in esports. And you just have to come to terms with this. You're rooting for players to have no work-life balance, to play as much as humanly possible, to keep themselves in decent physical condition, to not, for the most part, it's very difficult to have a romantic relationship. Not to say that top players can't do it, but we want you to trash talk, be funny, but don't ever make trash talk that's offensive. If you ever make a joke that's not funny, you should be fired from your job. So do all that at the same time, please. Yeah, just do all that. And it's like, and then they're like, oh, it's just a normal job. Well, like thousands of people tell you you're shit and like have direct access to your brain when you stream, and they just like tell you horrible things about you. I mean, you try and fucking do this shit, but at the end of the day, you have to be ethically okay with this as a fan. You have to understand that this is what you are causing. And you have to be okay with that.
Don't offend
it's pretty grim,
America. Good luck. I mean,
exactly.
Also, we've missed the most important playoff match.
The last one, yeah, of course. The mighty Dallas Fuel. The mighty Dallas Fuel, team I think's capable of anything. Love all their fans. Fuck them all. Is against the Vancouver Titans. The undefeated Vancouver Titans, who can't lose. Forget like they don't lose. They can't lose. You have to understand that. They are Thanos. Now I can't say. Now I'm literally trapped because I can't say anything else following on from that sentence because it will by definition be a spoiler. So they're not like Thanos, and now everything I say now has nothing to do with Thanos. So who actually thinks? Come on, Gunba. Do you actually think the Dallas Fuel can do this?
No, but it's a good chance to talk about Vancouver. I think we had JJoNak syndrome last season. We should have Vancouver syndrome this season. Like, we're a very similar team to them. And I don't understand what they're doing. Like, when they run in, the other team disappears. I just don't know why. I just don't understand it at all. I don't know what they're doing. And it just works. It works every single time. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it.
Is he reading off the Outlaws scouting report there? What the fuck was he doing?
I think the one thing that I think Krusty saw this as well. He mentioned it when he was on the desk. I saw they do actually adapt their goats play style to the teams that they play, right? And it's something no one seems to have noticed. But like against us, we played them. I'm sure in Stage 1, everyone was aware that we sent our Diva to kill Zen all the time. Like,
I mean, I literally made a video about this topic.
Yeah,
so.
Thanks a lot. I do that. So in the match, like that was kind of our plan, right? We realized that honestly, we felt like Twilight was the best player on their team. And we were like, okay, that's a good lineup for us. That lines up well. We should be stylistically, we should have some kind of advantage. And we go into the match, and Twilight's on the other side of the map every single fight. It's just like, fuck. I'm like, how do you adapt then? It's a big change, right? So maybe that's the coaching staff or the players. I have no idea, but I think they're underrated in terms of their adaptability.
I made a video about the Titan San Francisco match in Stage 1 where I said that they had completely adapted their play to isolate Sinatraa. And they were not using like self-destruct for grab. They were using it to carve Sinatraa. They were just zoning Sinatraa out with it and killing him. So
Dallas, to talk about them, I think they look better than they should right now. I mean, they are doing better for sure. There's no doubt about it. But I honestly think the Homestead, I have no idea, whichever one it is. I think that gave them a big advantage in the sense that they had a crowd on their side. It's a home arena. Like, they have all these fans. I think they overperformed as a result of that. And as a player, I played at World Cup in Australia in front of 2,000 Australians. Yeah, it helps. It helps when the other team is getting shit on by the crowd. That does help. So I'm not.
Babybay is really excited about the Atlanta homestand now.
Oh my god, I'm so excited, dude. And you're definitely right about the home crowd advantage. I remember I played a different game. I played this game called Crossfire, and I went to Brazil for an event there, and it's super popular in Brazil. It's kind of like 1.6. Like Fallen even played it at one point. And I remember playing against a Brazilian team, and I don't know, Thorin, I'm sure you know Brazilian fans.
I bet they were all shouting, "You're gonna die!" All sorts of shit.
Are
right?
insane.
Yeah.
But cool. It's so cool. Like they'll be like the Brazilian team. Their play style back then was like super slow, so there'd be like 10 seconds or like 30 seconds left in a round. All of a sudden, you would hear the crowd just start going crazy, right? They're like, because the Brazilian team's about to push in to the site. So just like you can hear that, and like you could like you feel that vibe, and it makes you kind of like nervous, dude. You're like, are they like something's about to happen? You know what I mean? Like, this is crazy. Like, yeah. So I definitely agree with that with the homestand thing. That like having a crowd behind you helps out so much.
They played a match after that, right? They played like a match in week 5. Am I wrong?
They didn't.
Yes,
no, they played Florida.
They beat Florida. So
sort of a
that
match.
Convincing, right? It wasn't as good as
it was
they were
3-1.
the previous week. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't as convincing. I will give you that. But also, Florida's sort of playing better. So
that's true. They got Koreans. I mean,
seriously, who else they get?
I don't think Fuel can win this. I don't see any way they can do it. Like, not
that's
even
a risky take.
I hope they do take some risks, because like my frustration is, okay, so we're heading into here's what I will say about this matchup. We're heading into a very long break. Teams are going to be off for like 4 or 5 weeks for the most part. Hopefully, we're hoping that a patch comes in or some other change that is going to maybe make GOATs worse. I know we've been saying that for like a year, but we still hope, right? We still hope. And if I'm the Dallas Fuel and I've got this long break, and I know categorically, if I play mirror GOATs into Titans, I will lose. I think that is just a fact.
Like I said, though, it's like you still have to play 60% GOATs, right? So you still have to beat them with GOATs.
You do. I don't know what the map pool for this is, so I can't make an argument based on map pool right now. I just hope we see some wacky shit from Dallas, because I would rather take the very low percentage if we were playing perfect Overwatch, I would rather take the lower percentage composition and see if I can do something to the Titans with it than try and just play a goat's mirror,
like basically,
which I think I will lose.
It goes like this. This is the question I would ask you. I'll reframe basically Monty's premise, which goes like this. If you accept the premise that a lot of people generally seem to agree with, that the best GOATS teams will pretty much always beat the teams that are like not close to their level at GOATS, because it's actually a fairly consistent meta in that respect. Does it make sense, if you know you're the worst team playing against them and that you're not at their level, to even bother playing their game, as it were? Or should you try what objectively is a very low chance to win as well, but at least is something different? It doesn't feel like an inevitability that you go in and you lose in that way. Is there a rationale to that? Because basically this was actually part of what was at the crux of our whole debate with Flame and Avast. And really the problem is they didn't really ever come down one side or the other. They just tried to argue there's nothing you really can do but keep playing GOATS. That was kind of their take on it. So where do you come down on this, Gunba?
I think that, like I said this at the start of the podcast, DPS is just good in certain situations. It's good on some points, especially 2 CPS. Some Koth points, we've proven that, Chengdu's proven that. I don't really see it as a matter of picking between them. I don't think they overlap that much. I think GOATS is objectively better on, especially the hybrids this stage, like Blizzard World. I remember that. Kings Row, I think? I never know anymore.
Kings Row, yep.
I've already forgotten.
Eichenwald.
But you go through the map pools. Eichenwald's in this stage?
Yeah, it was.
Did we even play it?
I think I played against
it very
you,
much.
bro. Yeah.
I
remember.
I think we dodged it.
It was our first, yeah, you guys clutched. RCK clutched, actually.
Oh yeah, we played against you at the very start, then we
That
stopped
Diva
playing.
Bomb? Oh my god.
Yeah, so I think
I'm looking at your last few
map
weeks. You're just like on Rialto constantly.
Yeah.
double this week. I think like
or on Kings Row constantly. Excuse me.
The escorts, the hybrids are kind of fucked. I honestly just don't think the stage is good for anything but GOATS anyway. I think that we talked about how the better GOATS team always wins. I think in Dive it was even more one-sided, right? Like Dive is very easy, even if you were complacent, to win matches because the coordination was so different. I think every team can play GOATS pretty well, right? So I think GOATS is closer than previous metas. I think it's also more teamwork-based, more communication-based. It's more about on-the-day performance. So in my mind, I don't really see... This is a situation where I think we look at these matches and say, well, they're not going to win doing GOATS, therefore there's something else that they should win with. They're probably just not going to win. Like, that's probably the issue here, right? It's
sure.
like
Yes, we know that. But I'm just saying, based on what the supposition that there's going to be a new patch next stage, you literally just preparing for this one match. You got 5 weeks off.
Yeah, put it this way:
what do you got to lose?
If you lose in this match, but you lose really close, it's not like that also helps you for the next stage. And it's like a longer term, because that was the other part that they tried to backdoor into that argument. The Outlaws, like, but we're just training for stage 17 of the 2015. It's like, shut the fuck up! Like, could you win that game there or not? And they refused to anger that, obviously. So, what do you think on that?
I think that, like, say they have like a 30% chance to win with GOATS, they probably have like a 20% chance to win with DPS, right? Like the chance of rolling the dice and winning there is probably higher on GOATS. I think that's like the error and assumption in my mind.
Okay, because I think the other way. So.
I think if they had more creativity and they came up with something novel, like
exactly,
I think
that's what I'm saying.
That's great. I just think playing like 3 DPS, for example, is not going to increase that chance of winning if they're playing at
6 DPS.
That'd be creative, right? Like that, I agree with that.
Exactly.
They should cheese. They should 100% cheese.
Yeah, I would love to see.
That would also be the most satisfying way to lose. At least all of you have got a gun. You're all firing. You're all going down firing like a fucking hero. Like,
just give up.
Sundance, Butch Cassidy in the Sundance Kid. Exactly. You don't want to go down just badly playing GOATS, just getting ground to pieces by Vancouver Titans as they swap roles and style on your fucking face in a stage playoff, and then you're just literally going out of the stadium and your mum's going like, "Oh, what happened, son? It didn't seem like you won that way." Shut the fuck up, mum. Like, it's GOATS. Don't you know anything about this shit? What was I supposed to do? Look at my coach. He's not Korean, is he? I can't win this game. It's unfair.
We can just look at our match. Dallas can look at our match against Vancouver. Because we did like the compositional allergy test already when we played them and tried like Orisa, we tried DPS.
Okay.
Tried like Pirate Ship on Gib. We tried everything against them. So they have the allergy test. They can just look, see what's Vancouver allergic to and just go with that. Like they have that advantage, I guess.
I mean, credit to you guys though. Like, this is what I appreciate about you guys as a team. So basically, what you're saying is you were trying to do exactly what I said that Dallas should do.
Yeah, cheesing, 100% do it. 3 EPS, yeah.
I don't know why it took us so long to get here, but cool.
They were testing if there was any weaknesses. Whereas we've already seen Babybay's approach is literally the Starship Troopers approach. He just plays the game and then he senses JJoNak is afraid. And then he that's when they swarm. They just come in at that moment.
Scared, bro. He was scared. I saw him pop trance in the first 30 seconds of the game when his whole team was dead already. I was like,
he always does that though.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't do it for the 12 win streak they had.
The man is a prolific trance waster, I mean.
Right, the question we should end the episode on then is this, is before the playoffs that take place, we should just pick who is the best team at the moment of the Overwatch League. Because as we said, even though the Shock had the crazy run, I mean, to be fair, Gladiators also almost went undefeated, but obviously not on every single map of the stage. Well, I actually saw one other thing I forgot to mention earlier, where there was a stat that said that the San Francisco Shock wins 41% of team fights after someone on their team dies.
This is actually a crazy stat.
That's outrageous.
So Zoe found this stat the other day, so credit to her for
Yes, it was on the desk segment.
Yeah, she was actually poking around in our stats database and literally had to ask Captain Planet, our stats guy, about it because it broke the graph. The graph system he made was all fucked up because this should not be he was like, I didn't build it for this because I didn't think it would be possible. So the stat is this. It's not perfect, but it is 33% of the time the San Francisco Shock suffer the first death in a team fight. But 42% of the time, if they suffer the first death, they win the team fight anyway. So this has never happened before in a stage where a team actually loses someone first at a lower percent than they win team fights with a man down, basically. Does that make sense to you guys? Clear?
More or less. I think the two things I'll address there is one, their chance to win when losing a player is almost as high as our chance to win with 6 players, which is kind of frustrating. All the work to do that.
Okay,
I wasn't going to mention that.
I saw the 41%
5 Shock
Reddit.
Players are greater than 6 Boston players.
I saw the 41% Reddit. I was like, wait, that's our chance to win. Honestly, I think those stats, I think they're also misleading sometimes because the trades are important. If they're sacrificing their brig to kill Orion constantly,
we actually do have stats about a lot of that stuff. It's actually crazy. If Super dies first, they win 85% of their team fights.
So they're getting space or they're enabling ults somehow. It's probably not just him feeding,
That,
clearly, we're not saying
it's not like they all just stand there 6v6 and then he walks forwards. It's not like his character just walks forwards, kneels down, and allows himself to be sacrificially executed, and then they say, "Right, we now play 5v6," and then still win 40 ups. That would be pretty good. I can't lie.
By the way, I love you, Gunba, because you're I'm like, let's talk. Thorin says, let's bring up this stat. Yeah. And you're like, well, these are misleading for XYZ reasons. You're literally on a long form podcast where we can talk about what the actual reasons are. That's what this is for.
So this is a little cool fact, but the reason why Rascal began to start over Architect was because we saw that in these moments where we were down in man, Rascal was able to clutch up, right? So it's actually cool that I'm sure if you find another stat where ever since Rascal's played, the amount of times you've won 5v6s, it's probably gone way up. That's a main reason why he was in there, because he had the ability to clutch in those situations where you're down a man and you need to pull it through. So it's actually so cool.
That's really good insight, and actually we can look that up with our database. So I will do that now. Thank you.
So cool.
So let's talk about how you win though when you're a player down. So Gunba, you were saying.
I think it was covered earlier by someone. I think someone said maybe it was you, Monty, talking about London or something. But they always try and clutch out fights and end up wasting their own time and so on. I think generally on defense that's fine, obviously, because you can test the cut. I think that's really important. Understanding that you've already lost and to take higher risk plays in those situations. I think that's a big part of it. I think another part of it is just being a team, like Vancouver or Shock, for example, that when they commit 100%. So if someone dies, it's because they died fighting someone else and their team is there to follow up on that, right? I think when you see people die and not win fights, it's because those people are just feeding. They're making positional errors, or it's not intentional. The Ryan doesn't walk in and just die and then they'll run away. It's almost a good thing. It's one of those weird stats where it's it goes from bad to good, depending on how you're doing it, right? Even though the stat seems negative all the time.
Sure.
So Babybay, when you're in a team fight, when do you decide when to like sort of bail, reset versus when a fight is winnable? I'm just curious. Like,
okay.
It's a very important part of this meta is to make those decisions extremely quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it's super like you have to have super good decision making for this, and I think that's the main reason why Shock is like so good is because like you have to be very decisive about it as well. So like a big thing with the Shock, I'll just use Sinatra as like so good at this as well. As like if he's in a good spot, you know what I mean, where he like he's just like reaping in damage, he'll be the one that will be like, no, we can actually win this fight. Like we can use ults, so we can win this fight. Okay, it's like when you know you're in a good positional spot, even if you lose a man, you know you can win the fight still in some kind of way, right? I still struggle with this. I mean, I did it against New York on Junkertown. I was like using grab when the fight was clearly lost. In my defense, the second time I used it when I solo grabbed someone, I like Dako was like, yeah, it's winnable, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna grab. But so it's you just have to have the confidence, in my opinion. You have to be in a good. First of all, you have to have good positioning, and then be very decisive on the call. If you like even lack a second or two on like just die on cart or we can win this, then like Gunba said, like you're either gonna do it really well or you're just gonna feed. And I think if you hesitate, you're gonna feed, and then you're gonna get snowballed and stuff like that. So I
like how you're throwing Dako under the bus there. So like anytime you make a mistake in the future, where it can just be like Dako probably called that.
You listen to comms. I'm like, I know I still shouldn't.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Like, but like in the comms, I was just like, I just trusted the comms.
Well, but that's
a good segue though, right? Like,
I actually think that that's an important point. Is that one truth of any esport is that it's better to make a bad decision together than it is to make two good decisions separately. So you shouldn't fault anybody for following Dako's call right there. That's better to do that.
I wanted like I mean, it wasn't the right play no matter what, but like everybody knows that. But it's just like I trusted my teammate and I want to make that play.
I think it also comes down to the strength of the rosters though, and like the experience. Like, we have a lot of rookies, so we should expect more development. But like Shock is a team that right now 5v6 against any team has a good chance to win, right? If they yell winnable in a fight, it's a good thing. Like, they're probably going to win a lot of those fights. Sure. If we do that, we're kind of throwing, because we're not favored 6v6, so we're not going to be favored 5v6. So I think as you become like a better team individually, you get your Sanji gets better, stuff like that, you can do a lot more of that. And like the word winnable for us is honestly poison. We should not call winnable.
Same. I have a question for you, Gunba.
Yeah,
you've expressed. So you went to the Boston Uprising. We covered this earlier, and you wanted to learn about management from Huck and like progress your career, et cetera, et cetera. Yet you keep coming up here and saying like, well, a lot of our issues are because we have rookies, and that's totally legitimate. But isn't there a fundamental problem with Boston where you keep trading away your experienced players? Like, don't you feel like you're kind of caught sometimes in a cycle of like constantly having to teach rookies that are getting sold to other teams? You look at a player like Gamsu, who has a fantastic reputation among other pro players. He is, if anything, I was very surprised about that trade, because Gamsu is like the consummate Overwatch League veteran. He's a veteran of multiple esports. He's the guy that you really want.
And has played with Westerners as well as Koreans in the past, so all of it.
His English is pretty good. Like, he's a leader. I know the other players loved him, and you decided to make this trade over to Shanghai. But what is, for me, the confusing part about Boston is, you're getting great value right now. But when I look at the New England Patriots, like, they're all in on Tom Brady. Like, they found the Tom Brady and they found the Bill Belichick, and like they stick with them, and they really take care of like their core franchise players. Is it the philosophy is that you guys don't feel you've gotten that franchise player yet, or that this is a system that you want to continue because you feel you're good about hunting? But it just seems like a lot of what you've discussed in this episode has been like, oh, I'm just waiting for the players to be better, but the system, the team itself doesn't seem to be putting you in a situation where you're ever going to get that. Or am I wrong?
Okay, so to address a few things, some good points, I think. So I don't think the players are the problem in that sense. Like, it's a factor of how fast we can develop rookie players, right? That is the Boston system.
I mean, that just takes time, right?
I think that it's important to understand that short-term versus long-term. So if we're losing in the short term because of like issues that are associated with having lots of rookie players, like discipline, developing their talent, having the experience, like Babybay talked about before, and coaches can also learn to and improve, of course. they're really different things because if we come into the play-ins at the end of this season and we have developed the rookies and we've done our jobs as coaches, well, then it's a good thing, right? In a sense, we've gotten more value than other teams from our players. So I'm not worried about the short term. I think that, yeah, like absolutely, if you sign up a bunch of rookie players, which a lot of expansion teams have done, you are going to struggle early on. But you shouldn't be expecting that to happen towards the end. And I guess that's the philosophy, is that you make that difference over time. I think if I'm still saying rookies at the end of the season, that's my fault, right? Like, then I haven't done the thing that we set out to do. I think also there's a financial aspect to it. Like, we haven't got revenue sharing this season. It's not really financially interesting for teams at the moment. It's kind of just like getting to the season 3 kind of stage. I'm not a financial guy, but I don't really understand spending like huge amounts of money on these rosters and getting like all the best players and doing all this stuff if there's no real return on it. So I get it from a business point of view. I think that philosophy makes a lot of sense in that way as well.
Sure.
And obviously, it's not like winning gives you the most fans either, you know, at the moment, as we can tell by Dallas and Houston. As for the point about players, I think we haven't found those franchise players. Well, at least not in Season 1. Right? So I'd not say about that. I wasn't there, so I mean, I don't really know. But coming into this season, maybe we have, and I guess we'll have to see.
I think that's just like a really interesting statement. Because...
What, Gumpson?
There was a few. No. I think he was implying a certain player who was removed from the league. You know, it's like young, versatile, pretty skilled at the game.
Unless we haven't talked about Dako and his issues, but like the culture is really important, right? Like, they have to get along with the culture, and we haven't had the most success with Korean players, to be fair. Like, that, I think we can own that. That's something we work on all the time. But it's not just about their ability to play the game, because that's not the issue, right? There's lots of good players, but if you have a player like Fisher who bails on the team in the playoffs, I mean, is it worth it? Like, is that sort of star power worth it?
No, it's a great question. It's always the question, and like, it depends on the answer. Is it depends on the team and how well they think they can manage that. Obviously, we've talked about that earlier in the show. It doesn't seem like a good fit for Boston, but it could be for other teams.
Put it this way: if you were a team who wouldn't make the playoffs, then getting to the playoffs and having him bail on you could be a positive. See, it's all just the perspective.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like, I think there's a real conversation to be had about where the Gladiators would have been last season without Fisher. Would they have made the playoffs?
Probably not.
So there you go.
Yeah, it was worth it for them. That's a trade-off, right? I guess like they're not keeping him over seasons there, so it's not a good long-term value. It's just let's fix this season, come into next season, and in the defense, that's what they did, right? Like, they rebuilt their roster. And they seem to be working. There doesn't seem to be as many internal issues, so.
All right, everyone give me their pick then. At the end of this stage, who will be the winner? Babybay, who's going to win this stage?
Shock.
What reason?
I just think that the reason why they didn't win last time is because they didn't have experience in like any final, really. They've never been in a final ever. And, you know, it went really, really long. And, you know, I think that Titans surprised the Shock by switching up their playstyle to be really, really aggressive. Which they didn't do like pretty much all series until the last map, where they completely like pretty much rolled on attack. And I feel like Shock will be ready for that this time, and they'll be able to adapt faster and realize that Titans is trying to change their playstyle like on the fly.
Gunba, who are you taking, Matt?
So I think like talking about who's going to win, like if you don't say Shock, you're probably crazy. I think that's sort of like, it's kind of the obvious answer. I think that to make it more interesting, my hot take would be that London would make it in over Vancouver. For the end of the stage. I could have egg on my face at the end of this. I could be completely wrong, but that's the thing that the offside chance I see happening, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that if London and Vancouver both advance, then they will 100% play each other because they're the 2 and 3 seeds. So any other team would be a lower seed than that would advance. So that would be who would play the Shock. So we may see that actually happening. We would have to see it happen in the semifinals, which would be quite exciting. I think London is an outside shot. I think London's going to keep getting better as the season goes on. I'm not 100% sold on them. I think it's possible that they could win. I predicted Shock to win last stage because I thought that they were a more disciplined group. And I think that after losing in Game 7, I think the fact that they came back this stage and won every fucking map and never slipped up and kept that discipline, even in a lower, like a weaker strength of schedule, I think that this is Shock's stage to lose. I think they want it more than the Titans do.
I'll just take the Titans just to be different, just to be the contrarian. I'll be the guy where, and also because then I can do that like total slime ball move where I'll just pretend like Monty and other people here, like, oh, I called it. It's like you did also pick an undefeated team, Thorin. Doesn't matter. Still picked them to win. Everyone went against me. I was 1 against 4. You know, like we'll just do that route. So I'll take them just because
that was my entire League of Legends career right there, Thorin.
Exactly. Exactly. The secret is you pick the second best team, but you hype it that like they're not the best team though, and then when they win you go, see, how could anyone predict that? Exactly. So now that we've given away the whole blueprint there, Monty, we better end this episode quickly. We'll just leave it on that.